Penn State escapes with a thrilling 33-30 win in overtime that saw the Nittany Lions overcome a 2-touchdown deficit at halftime to remain undefeated on the season. We break down one of the more wild games in recent memory. Nittany Nation Overtime is next.
The money is talking, I'm flowing, it's coming in just how I drew it. Yeah, you know what it is. Hey, we doing it big. Look up, there's no limit, no, we cannot settle for this. Yeah, can't stop, nah, won't stop. Yeah, it's been on live. You don't believe it, just watch.
Welcome into another exciting edition of Nittany Nation Overtime. I'm your host, Ryan Risky. I'm joined by the Nit Wits. We have Tyler Donahue pinch hitting for Mark Brennan this week, as well as Neil Rudel and former Nittany Lion Keith Conlin. And guys, a lot to unpack here. I think you got to start with Tyler Warren tying an FBS record with 17 receptions by a tight end.
Yeah, and I think it's cool that we got Keith in here because Warren is now in hallowed ground, I think, as far as working his way into the greatest tight ends, the conversation of the greatest tight ends that they've ever had. To me, you'd have to, put Ted Kwolek in there and Kyle Brady, your former teammate. 17 catches, and he did it all. He threw, he rushed, he snapped.
And caught a touchdown on that same play.
Yeah, terrific performance.
This is incredible, and I think with Tyler Warren, I got to go maybe back to 2017 Iowa game, Saquon Barkley, the last time in this kind of a spotlight setting where a player was that kind of a virtuoso. And this was probably beyond that because historically how dominant he was for the position. You're going back to the early 80s, to the 1960s, the last time a tight end did this. But I think we need to also look at what Drew Allar did over the course of Saturday afternoon out there in Los Angeles. They were staring a loss in the eye, a loss going into the bye week, and they didn't blink. And particularly number 15 didn't blink, and I really don't think that would have been the case this time last year.
I agree with you. He threw 3 picks yesterday, and he'd done that last year. What would have happened? He would have probably crawled into a little shell, come out of this post-game press conference saying it'll never happen again, like he did at Ohio State last year. Just seeing him grow and mature out there is absolutely amazing. And, to talk about Tyler Warren and, having played next to Kyle for 4 to 5 years I was here, Tyler is right there. It's not what everything he's done. He's snapping, he's throwing, all fullback, quarterback, whatever. Watch him block.
Right.
He's setting the edge. He's absolutely working guys and just physically pounding guys. He looks like an NFL-ready tight end right now.
This was complimentary football at its finest. Because when the defense had to have a couple stops after the 2 interceptions, the third one was kind of a Hail Mary at the end, they stepped up. And when the offense had to make a couple drives early in the third quarter to get them back in the football game, they did that. The special teams, I just think it was really a complete performance. And probably, to me, it was the best road regular season win of James's tenure and one of the best overall wins that he's had there.
And one thing to point out, too, Drew Allar career high 391 passing yards. And you could tell he had ice in his veins. He wasn't going to let them lose that game, especially once it got later into the second half.
42 pass attempts, I think that was. That's like double of what he was throwing earlier in the year, but yet that completion rate is still the same as it was early in the year, 70%. That's with the 3 interceptions. You don't really count the Hail Mary at the end of the game in that, but I think the biggest thing, guys, is the trust in distributing the ball. Mm-hmm. We know Tyler Warren got 20 targets, 17 catches, but Julian Fleming, 2 fourth-down catches on the final drive of regulation there. Omari Evans came up with a catch. Harrison Wallace had some key catches along the sidelines. There were some probably drops that would have helped their case along the way. But I think seeing Drew Allar, and Liam Clifford's part of that conversation, seeing him survey the field, and Nick Singleton's been a regular target in that too. And I'm just thinking about what Wisconsin and Ohio State have to deal with now as they get into the film room and try to wrap their heads around what Penn State's doing. There's a lot of ticking time bombs in this offensive attack right now, and I think Drew Allar is doing a good job of working with them within his disposal.
And I think one thing going back to Fleming, he had probably 2 of the most crucial catches in the game on that last drive, 4th and 7 and then 4th and 10.
Hey, for 16 and 17 yards. And, it's kind of funny, maybe old school. I wonder what you felt about it. It's 4:20 to go. They're at about midfield, not even. And I'm thinking, punt the football. You got all your timeouts. Try to flip the field. But they went for it. They've clearly played to win.
I mean, I'm not going to sit there and be that old guy and say, well, let's compare us to 94, because we're getting into that stage right now where defensive coordinators are looking at our run game and our pass game and got to figure out, like, okay, these guys are pretty well balanced. We got to figure out what we want to give up and what we want to stop. And that's where you want an offense to be. And then Kotelnicki's got these guys rocking and rolling right now.
And as we've said, just a lot to like from this game. We didn't even touch on the hero of the game in overtime. We'll get back to Penn State's kicking game once we return next on Nittany Nation Overtime.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Welcome back into Nittany Nation Overtime. Ryan Risky, Tyler Donahue, Neil Rudel, and former Nittany Lion Keith Conlin. And guys, the real hero of the game, though, freshman kicker Ryan Barker coming through in overtime to secure the win.
Yeah, and Xander had his chance early in the year, and that's the world of big-time athletics. He didn't even make the trip. But their kicking game, I think one of the keys was keeping the ball away from Branch, who's pretty explosive for USC. They did a really good job limiting the number of return yards, and the whole kicking game did well.
I had a chance to speak with Barker this offseason before I think really anyone had a chance to speak with him, and he talked about the fact that last year waiting in the wings as the number 3 guy, as a walk-on, having the confidence he could be a factor. And then what happened after Alex Felkins moved on, they went out and they grabbed Tulsa's former starter. Chase Meyer brought him in, and he's like, okay, well, here we go, more competition. And lo and behold, sounded like he was the leader in the clubhouse coming out of spring ball. And then Sanders Haydak was able to do some good things in preseason camp. And we heard from James Franklin multiple times they wanted game experience there. Ryan Barker didn't have that. He certainly does now. Yeah. And all he's done is go 6 for 6 on field goals. He's been perfect on extra points. And I just love the confidence he expressed to us in the offseason. He's expressing the same confidence coming out of a game like this. When he was asked after the game, I don't know if you heard this, what was he thinking before the kick? He said he was thinking about how he's going to celebrate.
How many years does he have left?
He's only a redshirt freshman. Again, this is a guy that I think if he becomes the guy this year, he can be the guy for the next 3 years and probably going to earn himself a scholarship.
Yeah, you'd hope so.
I mean, I kid around with the kickers and the punters and all that because he got one job to do it right. But that was a pressure-filled kick he had the other day. I mean, how much pressure was on that kid? I'm glad the game was tied and we didn't need that to win the game because it probably would have destroyed his confidence. But his confidence is probably through the roof right now, so that's a good thing for him.
I agree with you. You hate to see a kid, especially in that situation, lose the game. But hey, credit to the snapper. I mean, everybody singles out the center when something goes wrong, and the holder. You saw there was a big mix-up the other day in an NFL game with Cincinnati where the holder dropped the ball. So, hey, you got to give credit to the operation because we'd be quick to criticize it if it failed, right?
And can I just say, coming out of the first bye week, we figured this was going to be a concern maybe lingering deep. We're going to the second bye week, and it's not really a concern we're going to be talking about, and I think that's a pretty big deal for a team that's going to be having tight matchups that they're going to need to get through down the road.
And I think it's a credit to James and the rest of the coaching staff for looking at other options after Sanders struggled before that got to the point where you might be losing a game because of a missed field goal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going back to 1990 with Craig Fack. Remember, he was a true freshman.
Yeah.
Beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame. What, he hit 3 field goals out there with 4 seconds to go. So very reminiscent of that. Young guy, small, tiny,
Probably a separate show. That was phenomenal in-game coaching because I thought Joe was playing for the tie that day.
Oh.
But he was working the wind. He basically punted with about 3 minutes to go.
Yeah.
And they set up Notre Dame was already number 1, so they had to press to continue, and they intercepted. Yeah.
Speaking of coaching, I mean, you got to give James some credit for not punting the ball there late in that game.
Absolutely, they played to win.
We'll be the first ones that people will be first to complain about why he punted, why he didn't punt. He didn't. He knew what he was doing, and a great pickup on 4th down.
USC was getting chunk plays, so I think that was the right call. You couldn't risk them getting a couple more of those, milking the clock on you. I loved it. Showed confidence in Allar, showed confidence in Kotelnicki up in the booth, and both of them delivered.
And also don't forget, at the end of regulation, it looked like USC was driving to win it, set up for a game-winning field goal, and Jalen Reed comes up with a huge interception.
Yeah, on a bad pass. I mean, they were in a position to win. They threw a high ball to the kid with 6'6". And I thought USC was pretty tentative. They wanted to bleed all the time down and didn't run a lot of plays. I'm sure they regret that.
They might be looking for a new coach coming in the coming few weeks or months, in my opinion.
Maybe some NFL jobs will open
There'll
this
be some
weekend.
NFL jobs. There'll definitely be some NFL jobs open up.
Yeah, I mean, if that pass that's intercepted at the end, if that's on target, they're in field goal range, and who knows what the result would have been after that.
You know, but I was thinking as the game was going on, I thought the way Penn State came back, even if they had lost the game, and with the playoff now, that it would have been a disappointment, certainly, and would have added to some of the narrative. But I think they showed enough that they're going to be a tough out down the road here.
Especially coming back down 14 at halftime. I mean, they only had 2 field goals that first half. You just kind of assume USC, tough road game, you're traveling 3 time zones over, except that instead they came back in the second half, and we saw a lot of creativity from that offense.
And we saw a lot of responding to adversity. This is a team that feels like unless it's Ohio State or Michigan or maybe a bowl game, they're blowing most of their opponents out. To see them in the pressure cooker from the start, when you're down early, you're the rest of the way you're in the pressure cooker. So to see them respond that way, I think defensively, those 2 moments they had off the interceptions from Allar in their own territory, 2 possessions for USC, 0 total yards, 2 field goals settled for. I think when you look at why the game ended up reaching overtime, you can point to those moments.
And both of those drives ended, or the pass was picked off in their own territory. So they are, as you said, they didn't gain any yards, except they were still able to get field goals, and the defense stepped up. And I think once again, the second half for Penn State, the defense again looked a lot better than it did in that first half.
Better, but I think they have some things they need to address. It was certainly a slow start.
Yes, it was.
Again, on defense, they were a little bit out of position. They didn't cope or contain the speed as well, and I thought they might have missed some tackles as well.
Yeah, speed did hurt them a little bit, and on that fake reverse, they looked out of place in my opinion.
Yeah,
There were
how I felt.
three
play.
defenders.
It was a great play. I mean, you got to give USC some credit on that one. So.
I mean, very creative offense, well designed and well executed.
There were 3 defenders I feel like every single week now, we're through 6 weeks, they keep showing up. Denied Dennis Sutton, Abdul Carter, and Jalen Reed. It feels like every week those guys are making momentum swinging plays, more lately against Big Ten conference opponents where they're playing full 4-quarter games. And I think it's great to see, while you want the collective defensive group to play at a strong level, you're going to need some playmakers to win these big-time showcase games down the road. And we're starting to really see them emerge defensively. Although, again, collectively, can it be more buttoned up? That's what the bye week's for. That's why he brought in a guy like Tom Allen, but he knows he has the pieces out there.
All right, well, we got to take another quick break, but when we come back, we're going to discuss the big picture of this win and what it means for Penn State and their aspirations to get into the college football playoff. Don't go anywhere.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Welcome back into Nittany Nation Overtime. Ryan Risky, Tyler Donahue, Neil Rudel, and former Nittany Lion Keith Conlin. Guys, Penn State moved up to number 3 in the AP Top 25. I mean, big picture, things are looking pretty good right now, 6-0. This, and as we said earlier in the show, this might have been one of the best road wins under James Franklin.
I think it was. You had a great win at Iowa in 17, the pass from Trace to Juwan Johnson that might have been intended for Hamilton, who knows, look at the replay. But that was a great one. But for the most part, the road wins, there's been, come from ahead losses in big situations. So hopefully they can really build on this. But I think it's really the Ohio State game of 16 will be number 1 and the Big Ten title. Then you can make an argument that this game is right up there.
I would think,
based on where you are right now.
Right now, and that could change. We'll talk about it.
I think based on where they are right now and what they have ahead of them, the expectation, and if you ask Las Vegas, they'll tell you this too, is to get to 11-1 at the end of the regular season with that Ohio State game. If you can finally get that streak snapped, maybe you're unbeaten at the end of the regular season. But James Franklin has not got to 11-1 in his entire year. So to do it here, and when there's an opportunity not just to get into the playoff, but to bring an opponent maybe from the South or the West into Beaver Stadium, I mean, that's a whole different dynamic that we're saying. And right now, it's all on the table for them with the bye week to figure out how can we make the corrections that can make sure we are there come the first week of December.
Can I tell a guilty pleasure?
Absolutely.
I'd rather go 11-1 and host a playoff game and then have a bye, because I really have been waiting for a Southern or a Western team having to come north and play on December 21st. That's just how I feel. I mean, it's always been like we have to go down there. Auburn 3 years ago, it was like 186 degrees on the field.
Right.
You know what I mean? We've always had to go down and play in those environments, and they've never had to come up here. I always use the example of Notre Dame. Their big rival's USC. When USC plays at Notre Dame, the game's in October, guaranteed. But when it's at USC, it's always the last game of the season.
And when they were negotiating the new playoff rights deal, Notre Dame didn't want to be eligible for the first round bye because they wanted to be able to host in that first round and hope that you get with team from down south or out west.
But before you get to the playoff, they could be in a position where they have to play for the Big Ten title, and that would be another game, possibly against Ohio State, maybe against Oregon. Ohio State now coming off a real bitter loss to Oregon. So you wonder how that dynamic and what the tiebreakers may be also. They'll have to keep winning.
Well, what do we think early on? You'll talk about this on the next episode here, but this Wisconsin matchup, there's a little danger to it because not only is that a tricky venue in Madison and a team that when it puts it together, they can put out a really nice product, but that is right before Ohio State, and you know what that means to this program, and it's right after a bye, and sometimes you just check the psychology of a team after a bye. So you've lived it. What do you think about this potentially as a trap game right on their radar?
It's the ultimate trap game.
Yeah.
This is the epitome of the trap game. Of historically teams don't play well coming off of bye weeks because you're out of your routine a little bit, then you get back into the routine and you're not ready. I would rather play a game this week, to be honest with you. We got the momentum going from this USC game. It would be a great time to play the game. We've already had a bye week a month ago. You know what I mean? We might be the freshest team in America. I mean, you play 3 games a bye week, or 2 weeks a bye week, 4 more games a bye week, and then 4 more to end. And it's like, wow.
Can you get somebody on short notice? Would Pitt come over here just to do a favor?
Well, they'll want
be
a home
big
game.
Gate, right?
Pitt will want to play it at home.
Give them a home game next year instead of Delaware or something like that.
Neil's got to figure it out.
You don't want to play Nevada? Come on, man.
Sorry.
And then another thing to factor in, then you have the whiteout against Washington after Ohio State. And one of my concerns coming into this year was that maybe you did it too late because you have 2 or 3 losses heading into that. It might decrease the anticipation of it, where now I think the crowd, regardless of what happens these next 2 weeks, they're still going to be pretty fired up.
And Washington's coming in off a 40-point loss to Iowa, too, as your whiteout opponent.
We got to start talking about this travel. I mean, the travel from west to east and east to west, it's, what, now there's 2 wins now?
2 and 9, yeah, because Penn State won and
Penn State,
Washington
both of them
lost.
both of them are against USC at USC. But anybody who's gone to Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan goes out to Washington, they get thumped last week. It's a very tough thing. And I know James made a point about it last week about the airport thing and all that. That's all, I don't know if he was doing that to distract some stuff. I don't know what he was doing that for, but it is what it is. But as a player, it is brutal. You're used to a Friday afternoon travel, get to your place, go land, have dinner, go have a meeting, have a snack, go to your room. Now you're leaving Thursday, you have a whole day Friday that you got to figure stuff to do, and your biological clock's 3 hours ahead of what's going on out there. So coming east, I think it's a little bit easier to go west than come east because UCLA had 3:30 wake-up calls, if you think about it, when they played us. West Coast time, because their wake-up call was 6:30 a.m.
Well, James
and their clock was 3:30 a.m. in their head.
And James gave credit to going out Thursday, though. He thanked Pat Kraft and Neely. So I think that they took good steps there.
We did that going to Michigan. We did that going to Columbus. We couldn't fly out of State College.
Right. He didn't go out a day early.
Well, we always flew out of Harrisburg, so the drive down the whole hour and a half was going to throw you off. I don't know, but it is a 5-6 hour flight, and we're not small people.
Well, you were at one point.
Yeah, right. When I was born. But it's not comfortable for a guy 6'7", 330 pounds sitting in a chair for 5 or 6 hours on one of those flights. And your knees get creaky. You want to be up walking around a little bit. It's a hard thing to do.
It's definitely something to keep monitoring as we go forward. However, we got to take one more break, and when we come back, we crown our Nitwit of the Week.
Don't miss a minute of Nittany Nation Overtime, now also on Apple and Spotify. You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Nitwit of the Week time, and Neil, you've caught up to me and Andrew. We're now tied for the lead this year.
Hey, I only regret that Brennan is not here with his travel. Tyler, you're doing a good job, but somebody screenshot that and send it to him right away.
He knows.
Oh, he knows.
Oh, he knows.
Neil made sure to let him know
Yeah.
after the game.
Yeah.
So anyways, one more thing we wanted to talk about is the play of the offensive line. Once again, Drew Allar was left clean. He was not sacked.
Yep, that's a beautiful thing, man. And this was one of the things going in. I know I'm a Meade-head offensive lineman, but the last 15, 20 years, I've been looking for this offensive line, waiting for these guys to they've gone through 4, 5, 6 offensive line coaches. I think Troutwine's doing a very good job right now. He has a lot of depth. I mean, you're seeing kids in there. You're seeing 7, 8, 9 kids running in there right now, and they're not skipping beats. So great job with the coaching staff, and great job. Nick Dawkins, great leader, running those guys, and the future's pretty damn bright.
Yeah, and these guys are really being developed too, because they weren't always standouts these last couple years, but they landed on NFL rosters. A lot of offensive linemen now on NFL rosters.
Phil Troutwine was a really special hire for James Franklin. He's made a lot of them. Then adding Frank Leonard as an analyst with that offensive line, a guy who, if you're not around the team, you might not know about, but he is extremely vocal presence, a guy who's really driven that offensive line, a little more passion, I think. And I think there's been 3 phases for Troutwine. He's built up that room. He got to the point where it was a strength of the room, and then he lost 3 guys to the NFL, including probably the best bookends they've had at tackle in recent memory. And all of a sudden, it's reload time, and they were able to answer the bell. Has been an issue, and like you said, it's not just 5 strong; it's 7, 8 strong, and these guys are getting reps under their belt. So if something does happen, and injuries happen in the trenches, they're going to be in a decent spot to kind of deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, and it's kind of crazy when you think back to 2021. They were running thin. They weren't even able to have a traditional spring game that following spring because they didn't have enough healthy linemen.
You look at the key play in the game when Allar stepped up in the pocket, and he's been more mobile. He had a couple good runs. He ran for 32 yards. But Nick Singleton just got enough of a piece of a blitzing linebacker on that 4th down play to help create that completion to Fleming.
Those running backs block, and who else blocks? Tyler Warren. When he's not catching 17 passes, he is such an asset. I'm glad you brought that up earlier, and it's something that we all need to keep spotlighting. I know he can snap the ball, he can pass the ball, but he has always been a blocker. I think the first time a lot of people noticed him is freshman year, 2020, played late against Illinois in that bonus game, lit someone up at the goal line, and that's been a big hallmark of his kind of career here. Yeah,
it's nice that he even got the national recognition from the game yesterday. Anyways, we are out of time. Penn State's on a bye next week, but we're not. We'll be back next Sunday. So until then, you're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.